Good afternoon. This is our Torah on Parashat Shlach. Uh, the basic story of the Parsha is fairly well known. Moshe once sends Amoralim to scout the land. His agenda was good. Unfortunately, one of the most spies wasn't. They explored the desert, explored not the desert, the whole land of Israel, and brought the fruit back. And the spies lied and said, we were good. They were we were grasshopper in their eyes and their own. Um, all the men from 20 and above protested, and Hashem punished them. And after Moshe negotiated with them, with God, they were going to be not going to enter Eretz Israel, that generation that left Egypt, but they would be spread over 40 years. Um, the tribes then disobeyed, tried going up anyway, and were badly defeated because Hashem wasn't with them. Hashem then gives a law about what the korban is going to be and other halachic offerings to show them. And if they weren't going right away, they were they were going to eventually go in. A man gathered sticks to light a fire on Shabbat. And that's a whole story in itself, which I'll be getting to in a later portion. And it ends with the commandment to put tzitzit and fringes on the corner of one's garment or a cornered garment. And what I would like to speak about tonight is some of the deeper connections here. First of all, what is the connection between Yithro and the Meragli? And also, what's the connection with Kalev and Yeshua? And finally, what is the connection with the mitzvah of tzitzit? And to really get this full story on this deeper level, we have to start back earlier. First, let's turn to Yithro. Now, Yithro, who was he? Now, to go back, we have to go back to the first generation in which the world, after the world was created, and we have to look at Cain. Now, Cain had two sisters, of which Hevel wanted to marry one of them. Cain refused because I think he was interested in that sister for himself. In any event, Hevel knocked him down. Cain rose up and killed Hevel. Now, what does this have to do with the current generation and the whole story of Shlach? Let's go forward to the generation when we got out of Egypt, and I'd like to focus on Yithro. First of all, who was Yithro? Yithro was a Gilgul of Cain. He was one of three. I'm going to speak about two of them today since they're connected. The third one is in Parshas Korach. I'll discuss that next week. In any event, what did they have to do? They had and there was a whole story here because Yisro And who was Moshe was the connection there besides the obvious one. He was his father-in-law even before that. Moshe was Gilgal of Sais. No, excuse me, of Hevel, of Cain. I'm sorry, Hevel. And because Cain had refused to give one of his sisters to Hevel, Cain had Yithro had to give one of his daughters, Yocheved, to Moshe, his wife, which of course was Zipporah. Now, who was Zipporah? Zipporah was a Gilgal of that sister. So what happened? What happened then was that completed that circle. Now, who was the second Gilgal of Cain? Was the Mitri. Now, who killed the Egyptian, who was whipping a man that Moshe killed, and that was Mida Keneged Mida. What happened to that aspect of Cain? The Mitzri joined with Israel. Now, at that point, he was, with that Neshama report added to him, he was able to become Jewish. He reached the level, the main plan we saw Yithro was in Parashat Shlach. Now, when we see him, he comes, Moshe asks him to join the Jewish people. At first, he's reluctant, but then after everything, he decides to join with them. And in fact, Yisro's descendants, they moved near Jericho. They were so special that anytime there was a problem in Yerushalayim during the First Temple era, the smell of it was picked up in the Ketores, and they could sense the smell. There was a deep connection between Yerushalayim and the area near Jericho. And anytime there was a problem, it's based in the Gemara, they came to Yerushalayim to help out. Now, Yisro, despite everything, he was wealthy, Midianite. He sacrificed everything to come with us, which shows he is one of the positive spiritual elements of this story in Parashat Shlach, because he gave up everything to share with us, to share his future, his family's future, with the Jewish people. So that's one example, totally connected against the way that the 10 spies who lied. Now, that's one connection. Now, I'd like to look at the 10 spies as a group, then break them down to the ones who slandered the land, and Yeshua and Caleb, who did not, and trusted that Hashem would help us when we got into conquer the land. But not. Now, incidentally, Zipporah not only had a significant role then in that era, she eventually became, as a Gilgal, she became Devorah. And she led the Jewish people in battle, Barak, and also composed the famous shir in praise of Hashem. Now, who else do we have here? Was Yeshua and Caleb. Now, Yeshua, interestingly enough, was from the tribe of Yehuda. And he had the name Hoshea. Now, why do you have the name Hoshea? I have to explain more about the Meraglim. The Meraglim spies, there were a changing in wording. Originally, they were called Shem spoke to Moshe and said, "Hey, listen, Shlach Lacha Anshim Yithro Eretz Canaan, Ani Noten LeBnei Israel, Yishikad, Yishlat Sav, Yishlacho, Kol Behem. Send out one man for each tribe. Each one should be of a high rank. Before we called them leaders of the thousands, literally the shorish of the different tribes. It's changed since change. Now here it says, send out man for yourself. Now that's in the singular. When it says Shem commands, send them. This is send out one man for each patriarch tribe. Why do we have to repeat that? It's explained that the first one in the singular, because what was originally supposed to happen was Moshe was supposed to go and do the spying of the land. That's why it was in the singular. When it was in the plural, he said there was going to have to be the spies. And Hashem wanted to give them more protection, the spies, because he saw there was a possibility of treachery. So what did he do? He gave each one of them an added protection. What was the added protection? He gave them an ebor. An ebor is an neshama that can be added to somebody's regular neshama to help them out. Now, whose neshamas did the members of the 12 tribes get? That's going to be 10 spies who were evil, and the other 2 spies for that matter, Shua and Caleb. Now, who were they? They were the brothers, Yosef's brothers. Yosef's brothers. He said, "You're spies." He accused them a number of times. Parshas Miketz, and it turned out he was prophetic. Hashem gave him prophecy, Baruch HaKodesh, that they were, in fact, going to be the Meraglim. Hashem gave him these ebors to ensure that they would have a better chance of not slandering the land and doing what they were supposed to. Now, this little mathematical calculation problem here. There were 12 spies going out, and each one was supposed to represent a brother. However, there weren't quite enough to go around. Now, Levi did not send out a spy, even though Moshe would have gone if he had. Levi did not send out a spy. So what did spy? Because they weren't going to get a share of the land, they weren't going to go to war. Their purpose was different to service Mishkan. So what happened? The tribes left the poem. The tribe, to make up for the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Yosef split into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, Caleb got Ephraim, but Menashe, soul of Yosef, Menashe went to Menashe. And it was from Yosef, translates that he was one of the negative spies. So that left Yeshua, who's then Hoshea, without an Neshama to protect him. Um, because he was tribe of Ephraim, Yosef's Neshama had not gone, went to uh, Menashe. He was one of the 10 spies was going to die, slandered the land. So that left Yeshua unprotected. So Moshe added the name Yud Hey, Yud, Yeshua, which came from Sarah. That's a whole other story why. In any event, he got that added protection. And because he had the name, was by adding the name Yud, that with the Hoshea, that first letters fell the name of Hashem, Yud K, and that was divine protection. Now, so therefore it worked out. And also, Yeshua, we look at it, significance for later on, just like I explained with the Sipporah. Ephraim is the tribe from which Meshach ben Yosef will come. Now, Olive was from the tribe of Yehuda. Now, according to many sources, Yehuda visited a Gilgal of Yehuda, and that was significant in itself. So, plus there was another protection. So Kalev eventually became Yeshua David, and Ephraim was Meshach ben Yosef. So you see the two partners, Yeshua and Ephraim, both working. That's going to go down through history to present Zman, present era. And interestingly enough, there's a further extension here. Yeshua, excuse me, if Yeshua was a Gilgal of Yosef. Now, it's directly from him, and that's interesting. He marries Rachav later, Rachav, and who is she? She was Potiphar's wife who came back and this time was pure. So that was Mida Keneged Mida. She made him she tried seducing. Now that was gonna be corrected. Now that takes care of that. Now Kalev, it's a tribe of Yehuda. He had one interesting thing in his background. He was a descendant of Eliezer, Abraham's servant, the one who went to get Rivka as a wife for Yitzchak. But at that time, he was a member of the Canaanites who, in the time of Noah, he had cursed the descendants of this descendants from and then Canaan, his son, and when he says now later on in the Parsha that Kalev is of a different neshama, different spirit, which was true, he meant that even though he came from Canaanite background, which was a person that had been removed from him, and that's why he went up separately to Hebron to be near the cave of the Imaot and Avot, cave of Machpelah. Now, that explains the positive ones. Again, they wanted to settle the land, and they kept their evils. They kept pure because they were serving Hashem. And what happened to the other 10 spies? They, despite the advantage of the Ebor, still came evil and slandered in the land, and they, therefore, when they came back, lost that. So we see how all of this comes together. Now, what does any of this have to do with tzitzit? These all were Moshe, Yeshua, Caleb, and Yithro all wanted to settle land and realized that the only way one can be truly spiritual is to work the land. Hashem always intended to dwell with us in the lowest levels of his creation, which is the Olam Hazeh. And therefore the other spies were incorrect. Not only to do it out of fear, but because they wanted to stay in a pure Kedusha level of desert learning Torah, and that was not what we're intended to do. We're intended to become part of the world and do Kiddush Hashem, show how respectful we are and how we serve Hashem and honor his name by our behavior. And that is the next connection. Now, what about tzitzit? What does tzitzit have to do? Discussion of tzitzit's a whole thing in itself, but spiritually, what it does is helps us remember all the mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs are elevate us, and that gets us to higher and higher levels of spirituality, which sends up certain power to certain impact our mitzvahs and Torah, and that sends down, Hashem's waiting to send down light and give us all kinds of spiritual beneficence. And that is the connection, because it again shows that the only place you can really do this is Israel. May we all have a good Shabbat and Shabbat Shalom, and may we merit the completion this year.